Morning cuddles and Bluebell in bed. Hey, darling. Morning cuddles. Cannibalism, bird boys, and happy shiny people. Welcome to this week's mood reading vlog. I'm Chanel and I'm here to tell you about the books that I have read. So starting off with A Shining by Jon Fosse. This is an itty bitty novella that is litfic / magical realism. Basically, a man's car gets stuck and he decides to go off into the woods at night in winter in search for help. And he comes across some beings. One of the beings is this kind of light-filled entity, which kind of reminded me of Mr. Burns.
I bring you love.
Love. Sorry, I try not to giggle because it's not meant to be funny. In this book, the man is utterly confused throughout the entire course of the novel, and it's written in a stream of consciousness style and is very circular, very repetitive. I'd say it has a very loose plot. Things do happen. It ends ambiguously, but I can kind of guess what was going on, and it's not what is happening at face value. But I just didn't like it. It was honestly so repetitive and meandering. It's almost like this dude had dementia. That's the level of confusion and just the circular thinking that was happening. The writing is very simple. This is a translation, so the language was very simple in this. So I'll give you an example. Now I just had to find someone. That was the only thought in my head now. Find someone. Find someone as soon as I could. Find someone who could help me. But what was I thinking? Because it didn't make any sense to go into the dark woods to find someone. I'd probably never done anything much worse than this. First getting my car stuck and then walking into the forest to look for help. Really, what could have made me think I'd be able to find help in the forest, in the dark woods? That thought? No, it was totally wrong to even call it a thought. It was more like an impulse, a sudden idea, something like that. Something I just came up with. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what the writing's like. So for me, this didn't do anything. I gave it 2.5 stars. This author is a Nobel Prize winner in literature. I haven't read any of their other work. This one, how many pages was this? Was so, 41 pages. Really tiny, but yeah, the story did nothing. The characters I didn't care about. The writing wasn't for me. So I might give this author another shot. If you've read Jon Fosse and you think something of theirs is fantastic, tell me which one. But yeah, this one wasn't to my particular taste. The next book I picked up is The Dead Take the A-Train. This is by Cassandra Khaw and Richard Kadri. The cover caught my eye. This is classified as a queer urban fantasy horror, I would say it's an eldritch cosmic type of horror, obviously with a lot of body stuff too. Overall, this reminded me of the film TV series Angel, in particular the law firm. So was it the character Lila working for the law firm? Because there's a law firm in this that worships these eldritch entities and sacrifices things to them in order to be on top. So it's a lot of sort of corporate evil shenanigans going on in here. You have the main character, Julie. She's, what would you call it? She's a Constantine-like character. So she's very sassy and takes no shit and has a coke habit like you wouldn't believe.
Clean it up, Kokor.
And people call her to exercise a lot of creepy shit. So yeah, very Constantine-esque. But Julie just keeps getting the short end of the stick, especially from her ex-boyfriend who works at said law firm and gets her to do his dirty work for him and then takes the credit and barely pays her. There were some really interesting characters in this, so I did like the world building. I felt like the magic system was confusing though. I didn't really understand everybody's powers and how they worked. I felt it was a bit messy in that regard. The storyline also was quite messy. It wasn't very clear, and I was even at times guessing what is the plot of this, and I was hoping that everything would make sense in the end, but I would say that it didn't. There's also a sapphic love interest in this, but that story is so incredibly limp. I'm not a fan of childhood friends to lovers. It's not my jam. But yes, I've given it 3 stars. I felt like this could have been phenomenal. It just needed to be cleaned up a little bit. It needed a some final touches and some tightening up. I will say though, the ex-boyfriend, I've forgotten his name, Tyler, I think it was Tyler. He was a massive douche canoe and everything just seems to work out for him. And that infuriated me. I do not like to see the bad guys prevailing. So this is one of those books where if you also hate that, you won't enjoy that aspect. Julie is the underdog and she keeps getting beat down, and Tyler is the golden boy and he has the Midas touch. Like I said, I enjoyed the writing. It's just the storyline needed some finessing, and the magic system needed a bit more explaining, because there were certain characters that were made to be or seemed to be incredibly powerful, but then they were easily defeated, and that was confusing. But The Dead Take the A Train by Cassandra Cole and Richard Kadri. New York is a hell of a town. New York City! 3 stars. And then we have an incredibly interesting book. This is The Tree of Ecstasy and Unbearable Sadness by Matt Otley. This is an immersive experience because it comes with a CD at the back, but also a link to their website where you can listen to, it's a soundtrack and audio narration of the book, but mostly it's a musical composition, so with orchestra and that kind of thing. I started off playing it, but I'm very noise sensitive, and I ended up just reading it myself and then listening to it afterwards, which I know is not how you're meant to do it, but that's how I did it. So this is a YA picture book about mental health. I'm going to show you some of the illustrations. So this book is what I would call strangely beautiful. It is recommended for readers 15 plus. It's very Alice in Wonderland-esque. But I love the illustrations. I thought they were absolutely stunning. This really is a unique reading experience, especially if you do it with the audiobook. So this is a story about a boy who has within him a tree that bears flowers of ecstasy and fruits of unbearable sadness, which is an analogy for mental illness. And he goes on an inner exploration, whilst also you're seeing how it is affecting him in his external world. Like I said, I don't want to talk much about it. It's very, I don't want to say it's nonsensical, but it is very whimsical. It's dark, it's fascinating, and I gave it a 4 stars. I just thought it was a really interesting experience, and I'm glad to have read it. But if you like the idea of listening to composed music and audio narration whilst flipping through a beautifully illustrated picture book about heavier themes done in a fantastical, magical way, then this would be for you. The next book I read is Before the Forest by Cal Woods. So this is a prequel little short story. It's a grim, dark origin story of the gingerbread house witch from Hansel and Gretel. So once again, this is dark fantasy horror, and trigger warnings for domestic violence, sexual assault, animal harm, and cannibalism. But in this story, it makes sense. So I had no issues with the darker triggers because this was beautifully written and devastatingly brutal. It is not for the faint of heart, but I thought it was fantastic. The writing is gorgeous. It was very interesting to see this villain's origin story, and it makes sense, and it had me captivated and hooked. Do you feel for the villain? Yes, but also their actions are extreme and reprehensible. So I think that's the case with a lot of villains, you know, that have something inflicted upon them, and you think, well, yeah, that's shit, but their reactions can tend to be a little too far, taken too far and too intense. But at the same time too, I'm like, I get it. I get it. You got to do what you got to do to survive and thrive. And that's what this little witch did. But like I said, please, it's so hard to talk about intense books and recommend them, because then if someone reads it, they're like, what the fuck did you just recommend to me? I did say the trigger warnings. All that does occur in here. But like I said, this is one of those cases where those trigger warnings could make me hate a book, or it makes the book even more impactful, and it's the latter in this case. I have read this and After the Forest by Cal Woods, and I would definitely read more from this author. But yeah, this witch does make Mother Gothel look like a saint. And I gave it 4.5 stars. And then the final read for this reading vlog was The Memory Theatre by Karen Tidback. So this is another dark fantasy with horror and it says sci-fi elements. So in this story, you have a lost boy and the daughter of a mountain, and they find themselves in this parallel world called the Gardens. And sometimes, unfortunately, children from Earth find their way there and it does not work out for them. Basically, this world is ruled by these immortal fae-like creatures. So think of the most evil iterations of fae, the ones that inflict cruelty out of boredom and for the sake of entertainment. And these fae love to torture the children, kill the children, and eat the children. Instead of Marie Antoinette's let them have cake, it's let them have kids. So you've got this girl and this boy who are obviously longing to escape, and they do, and they end up traversing these different worlds, and they end up at different crossroads. And as they grow and as they meet different people, it changes them. You've also got a villain in this, so you get to see their little journey and adventure, and my God, I could not stand them and I wish them a bloody, bloody death. This is dark once again, but it worked for me. I absolutely loved it. I think if you enjoy The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making and Sean Maguire's The Wayward Children series, would also enjoy this. It's got a very whimsical writing style that's beautiful and heartbreaking. And what happens to these children is violent, but there is also beauty to be found within it. And unfortunately, sometimes you might be heartsick for your home, but it is not a home that you can return to. So home and belonging and being unable to outrun who you are themes that are in this book. But it was quite surprising. I absolutely adored it. 4.5 stars. Would read more from this author. And I'll have to say my favorite character was the library keeper. Yeah, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So these are all the books that I read. Had a really good reading week. The only book that I didn't really enjoy was this one. And look, I pushed through it. It's only 44 pages. So I thought, even though I wasn't enjoying it from a couple pages in, it's so short that I did not want to DNF because I knew I could bust it out in like 20 minutes, which I did. It was a 2.5 star, but I did want to check out some of these Nobel Prize winners of literature, and I have done so. I don't know what's going on with me in terms of edging more towards darker, more intense fantasies and horrors. I guess all of that brutal, all of that really depraved that I've read has, I guess, increased my tolerance. So as long as it's not extreme, I'm like, oh yeah, this is actually pretty good. This is exciting. This is different. This is engrossing. But I am going to leave you with some footage. I'm going out to a cafe and then I'm doing drive-bys to try and find some houses that are decorated for Halloween so my kids can go trick-or-treating, because not many people, unfortunately, are doing it this year. You know, money is tight for everyone. Inflation sucks balls, sucks hard. So I understand people are probably tightening up the purse strings, but it's a shame. I used to love when everyone would decorate their house for Halloween. It was becoming more popular in Australia, and I thought, oh my gosh, are we actually going to end up getting on par with America? But no, it's taken a backslide. I did walkabouts in my own neighborhood, and there was one house in a 30-minute walk. One other house. And I'm like, no, that's not going to do. So I'm just trying to find some street where there's a bunch of houses so we can just take the kids there, let them door knock, and then bring them home. But that's everything from me. I'll leave you with the footage of food and Halloween houses. Until next time, stay wild, star child.